You're listening to What's Contemporary Now, a show about culture and the people, places, and things that together make it up. Always eluding the traps of time and linear realities, one might forget that Francesco Risso has been at the helm of Marni since 2016. Ever operating in his own environment of iteration, ideation, and collaboration, he somehow seems to be winning a race that he's not even running. More invested in his own curiosity and that of his creative partners than he is in paying all that much attention to the supposed rules that apply in this ever more competitive game. His work has led the brand to both commercial growth and recognition from a broader audience. My only regret with this episode is that we didn't have more time.
This is Francesco Risso, and we're talking about what's contemporary now.
Francesco Risso, you were born on a boat and had claimed that you grew up with a sense of total freedom, which sounds like a pretty spectacular start to life. But you also mentioned that you were pretty much silent until the age of 16. So let's talk about life before your big jump to Florence.
Yeah, after this incredible adventure with my dad, who decided to live on a boat for a few years with my mom, and I've happened to born there on the 30th of December. Luckily, I don't remember anything. After a couple of years, we moved back on land in Genoa specifically. And we moved back all together. My parents, my sisters, my brothers. I have actually 5. And my grandparents were living with us. It was very hectic and a very populated house. And I was the youngest because my brothers and sisters are all 10, 12 years more than I am.
Oh, wow. Okay.
They all come from different families. Then my parents met and they had me and we all went to live together, which thinking about it now, it was such a crazy thing from my parents to do because putting all these various and different families together was certainly not an easy thing. It was very loud, very, very loud. A lot of characters. My grandparents especially were quite eclectic. My dad as well. And my brothers and sisters were in their full teenage years. So I was very, very young. And somehow I was in this observation sort of point of view. That different of age maybe made me more silent, made me more shy about things. My brothers and sisters were literally making parties every night. And my dad was inviting all sorts of friends for lunches. And so our lunches were a bit of a commune kind of feel.
Which is also very Italian, right? Culturally?
Very, very Italian. He would disappear maybe for days and then come back with 5 friends, and then they would stay at the house, and then he would add on to all the rest of the family. And I guess having born in that situation, I didn't have the skills yet to interact as much as they were doing. So I literally started kind of living my own adventure towards making in those years. And making with my hands was, in a way, my way of talking and my way of expressing myself. That was better than words. That was my own tool to kind of say that I was happy or mad or just exploring, And then I ended up obviously scavenging my grandmother's closet, which was quite incredible. My grandfather, my father, my mother, my sisters. So I was sneaking here and there, maybe stealing some pieces. And then I would literally cut the pieces up and remount stuff out of their clothes. I was literally almost like one of these dogs you have to pet and take care of because they're ruining all your furniture with their teeth. My sister still calls me the virus of their closet. But for me, it was like a drug. Literally, I was obsessed about it. I couldn't wait for the moment somebody was going out to kind of scavenge again and then mount some more clothes. So I was literally making my own clothes since I was 8, 9 years old.
That's incredible. And this was the 90s, right?
Yeah, it was the 90s and I loved it. I didn't realize that then I was going to become a fashion designer, actually.
Well, you still realized that quite young. I mean, given the age that you moved.
Yeah, I was quite young.
Mm-hmm.
However, I directed all my studies towards art, actually towards classical studies and then art. And then there was a moment I abandoned that practice of stealing clothes and making clothes out of my hand. And then I think one day I woke up, maybe while I was learning more about art, I was painting a lot. And I thought that is actually what I really want to do, is to make clothes. And that's when I moved. I kind of consider it a bit of an escape as well. From that loud family, I was finally able to get out and I went to Florence. And then after a few months, I went to New York.
Yeah, I remember reading that you ended up at FIT and obviously you finished at Central St. Martin's, and we'll get into those bits. But in that era of the 90s, obviously today people look at particular chapters as the kind of relevant reference points. But it's been said that you very much came up in the sort of 90s subculture of Italy. And I don't think a lot of people understand what that looks like. So how would you describe it?
I would say that there's nothing that I think can be defined subcultural about Italy in those years. I think Italy in those years was very, very traditional. Every part of Italy was very traditional. Even fashion was traditional in a way. Like, it was not disruptive. It didn't feel like the subculture that was spreading in its expression, like for instance from the UK or the States, or like, in expression of music. I don't think that Italy actually gave a lot in those years. Me, I was living maybe the dream of those countries more than Italy. I was a goth, I think, in that period. And I was obsessed with Kurt Cobain. I was obsessed with Smashing Pumpkins and all that, all those movements. And I have to tell you, like, walking in the streets of Genova or Florence and also Milan for a creature like me was not an easy game. It was not easy to be at school. It was not easy to be in social environments because people were extremely conservative.
Mm.
And the only real like gate to another land was the dance scene.
Mm.
The dance scene was really the full expression of like wearing clothes, being okay with whatever you are. And that actually gave a lot of expression. And there were like incredible parties from Milan to literally going to like Rimini, Riccione. Like, it was like a period which went on since the 80s, but the 90s probably was its best moment.
Are we talking clubs or like a rave scene or?
Yeah, both clubs and rave scenes. Clubs were more close to raves, and raves were less ravey than today, let's say. You know what I mean? Like, they were less slouchy than today. Slightly more fancy, I would say. Less aggressive than they are today. And clubs were, in a way, more daring. We end up many times, like here in Milan, talking about how much we miss like that period where also like dance was very much combined with fashion and going in these places and really like put up yourself like for the maximum. Really, with like outrageous looks and full on, like it was a ritual. And now it's completely changed.
There was a great deal more to push up against in terms of how personal style could be an act of rebellion. I think a lot of what you're describing in the nightlife was much different in that way.
For sure, for sure. And It was an active rebellion. It was an active rebellion to walk in the street that dressed in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
It was an active rebellion to walk in the street hand in hand with a man
Mm-hmm.
or a trans person or a different person. It was not just about sexuality or gender.
No, of course.
It was also about like, how would you look? You know, if you look different, you could be either looked at with curiosity or with a lot of judgment. I was really going up for it. I was actually enjoying that moment, expressing myself as much as I could. But yeah, it was a protest. Fashion was like a movement against society.
Well, it's interesting that you talk about having gone through a goth phase, because the idea that you're as interested in the dark as you are the light, or even your love for extreme romance that can end in tragedy. I mean, these are elements that show up in your varying collections and the work that you've put together in a way that's never really relegated to one world and somehow becomes a world as a result. But what were some of those pivotal moments growing up in terms of cinema, art, literature?
Yeah, I always laugh because even now when I think about it, I feel a bit dumb myself because so high school I did a part of like classical studies, so Greek,
Mm-hmm.
Latin, literature, and then I wanted to move into the art school because I draw and I paint and I wanted to learn more about it. So the time of the degree comes and I have to present my thesis and I go with like a horror movie thesis. My teachers were like, man, what the fuck? That was the peak of my curiosity, I think, to give that thesis because those dark stories somehow, they always contain extreme romanticism in my point of view. So tragedy happens because either an entity or a person feels more and more than maybe others. And also it becomes like even more intense and even more provocatory and even more visceral and obsessive. So I think I was always very intrigued by how extreme that romanticism was brought to because most of times it starts from a love story and then it ends up into becoming a monster. So I guess that's why I was always intrigued by the dark side. And then there's obviously like a part that it's I think that it's literally inlaid in my DNA and I'm still trying to unravel it.
Well, that's the beautiful aspect of being complex and creative, right? You have a great deal to draw upon.
I guess, I mean, what really fascinates me, and this is something that I've learned in the last years, is that there were times in which I was refusing my dark side because I thought that it was dragging me down.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was a time in which I learned to accept it and go through it. And that was a time in which those two kind of like yin and yang, let's say,
Mm-hmm.
became more playful between each other. So my little evil on one side and my little angel on the other side. So now I accept that dark side in a much more pleasant way and in a much more soft and lovingly way. I had an incredible, adventurous childhood and equally very troubled, let's say. However, I'm so grateful that I had it because if I didn't have it, I wouldn't be the person that I am. I think, in a way, when you're young, you try to understand certain things and then you get older and you learn. And if you're open to dig into yourself, then you might get many surprises.
And you also, obviously, having attended all those incredible schools and then spent 8 years working with the genius that is Miuccia Prada, where do you think it is that you learned this ability to build a world so well in terms of what it is that you've accomplished with Marni.
Thank you. Thank you. Every day I ask myself, are we building a world? What are we doing? What I've learned from the experiences that I have gone through is that, first of all, I'm not interested to do fashion in a way, or whatever job, in a way in which it will become a sort of like domination of life. And I don't want to say boring, but actually have this beautiful tool transforming it into like a flat kind of expression. I am so lucky to be able to do this job, which is about making with my hands, which is about working with my creativity, working with a lot with my head, and living it through my life in every possible moment, like from when I sleep to when I go back to sleep the day after. What I've learned was always like grasping as much as possible in terms of agility, on how you can always be at ease with reinventing yourself, with criticize yourself, with challenging yourself. Be okay with the fact that sometimes you might be blocked and then you have to find creativity again. All those elements are many elements that came through in different phases of my learning. One of the most incredible was with Louise Wilson at St. Martin's. She was so mean to me because I was coming from United States and I had a sort of American accent, and peace to her, but she was very English, so she hated my American accent. But what I loved is that she would push to work on an idea for months without any possible fashion references. So you could get inspired by this chair or a fork or a tooth or a skirt even, but the whole process was about building up a world around it that was not related to clothes or fashion. So that was actually such a strengthening towards exploring, diving into ideas, diving into process, diving into research without auto-referencing or referencing to fashion or referencing to other designers. And this remained for me one of the most incredible skills, even nowadays when I have moments that I'm up for the next and then the next and then the next, and one overlaps the others. There are moments in which, oh yeah, man, you just like, it's okay to be blocked, okay to freeze. But it's not that an idea is going to drop from the sky because, like the rain. You have to work for it. And work for it doesn't mean necessarily to work for it in like, oh, if I work more in fashion and I work more drawing clothes or making clothes, it's going to come. No, maybe it's not going to come at all. But then I move myself into studying, into reading, into know more about things, and I get more relaxed about that block, because in the meantime, I feel like I am exploring a bit more of knowledge and I am conquering more culture. Then your brain somehow release, and through that knowledge you move around and you go ahead.
Well, that's something that was really interesting about the approach you took on this last collection, with the decision to remove any visual stimuli or any point of reference and create a little bit of a cave with the team. Can you tell us about what sort of set that intention off?
Actually, it really started from a block. It started from the fact that I felt heavy. I felt really heavy. Like there was a moment, maybe a few months before working on that collection. Somehow I had come off of Instagram for a long time. And I jumped back in. And then I kept seeing like things speeding up even more, like where in the arch of like few seconds you pass by a war, a little puppy, people having makeup, people cooking, a friend, a selfie, a war again. I mean, the most insanity and insane kind of like visuals in boom drenched into like not even 5 seconds. I read this piece from Virginia Woolf where she's sending a letter to her friends, inviting them to the countryside, and she's saying,
Don't bring clothes or something.
bring no clothes." And
Yeah.
I'm like, well, she's not suggesting, to play nudity, of course.
Mhm.
At that time, she was suggesting to come as they are with no structure whatsoever, both in terms of clothes, but also like without their social structure, I believe. This is how I interpret it. And that really pushed me. And I thought, actually, I need to enact a process of destructurization of what we have built in the methods. Methods have become usually like mostly in the industry, but even when you speak to make deals or with business people or with it's all about like visuals and images, and it's like the image screams more than words or feelings or making even. So
Mhm.
I thought, you know what? Actually, we have to ban images because maybe we need to detach from this like continuous mirror that we have,
Mhm.
this continuous like referencing to things of the past, of the future, of the present, or even just like whatever happens to be on a wall. So I was like, we need to wash out, of all of this. And we took paper and we started covering everything. Also, the structure of the room in a way. So windows, floors, not just to ban images, but also to lose the reference points.
Mhm.
And you know what? It was that gesture altogether was the most beautiful set of fire together. And then we were like, let's just make clothes. We know what we stand for. We know, for instance, what Marni is about. So let's just make this as an act of instinct with no para essential needs,
Mhm.
because also we have to consider that we are driven by so many needs, and many of them sometimes are very oppressive. I'm not gonna lie, like I live well with it, but maybe we just need to make beautiful clothes.
That's another thing I wanted to talk to you about because I do think that I wouldn't call it necessarily rebellious, but under the incredible amounts of commercial pressure that designers are under today, because fashion has become such big business, you've managed to retain what appears to be absolute creative freedom. And somehow, in doing so, and not necessarily falling prey to those obligations, you've increased sales and you've created this almost cult-like following that's growing around the brand. So what's the secret to that type of creative freedom and still succeeding in such a business-oriented industry today?
I was and I still am very lucky to work with an incredible man who allowed me to demonstrate through creativity and through ideas that actually those can create a movement and create an interest, and people love that. People love to come at Marni and find that, rather than the scheme that it's maybe part of this like structure that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Everything that goes kind of like in a friction with a scheme, like almost like against it. It functions really well at Marni. And I think we have created this through trust and through courage. For me, it's essential to live this with some kind of pleasure.
Mm-hmm.
As you know, and it doesn't mean that I have to be a smiley every day. No, 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 no. I mean, there's a lot of suffering in the making as well, but our pleasure then conveys into the clothes that we make and the emotions that those clothes delivers to the people. So it is vital to me to live through that process and hit my head on the wall and eventually start again, and then feel like, oh my god, this was the best time of our life. Because that's really is, it is what it is about, actually. After that moment in the, before the cave, then with my team, with our hands making things, we literally bonded again so much, and we were not focused about the final thing. We were focused about on the moment. And I think, if I may, without judgment, I think there's a lot of like thinking too much about the end rather than what we have in the moment. And I fascinate so much about stories of even of the 90s or the 80s, or even about young designers now, or young stories now that maybe I'm less aware of, but people that just like made with no much of a plan, and then it became a dream, but now, if you don't have a plan, if you don't have a business plan, if you don't have like a double digit, triple digit, blah 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 growth, you better do not exist.
Mm-hmm.
And most of incredible phenomenons of our time haven't born because they were thinking, oh, we need to conquer the world. So I think maybe that's kind of like not really like working well with like spontaneity. And I think for instance, people that buys into ideas and clothes, I think they're smelling it so much.
Well, you've been a big lover of community and collaboration across your time at Marni, and you've definitely cultivated those things with certain thought partners, and obviously something like what you've recently done with Paloma that was described in such beautiful ways in terms of freedom and joy, both of which she brings to kind of every situation. But how does that approach differ from the other collections when you're working on Marni Jam? Is it something that you kind of hold through a different system of thought? And what goes into choosing who it is you're going to collaborate with?
Let's say, more than community, I think all of this is born really out of almost like a mutual passion between each other and what we make and what we do in terms of expression, or people that talks or make art or make music or whatever. And this is to me like beauty. When you're walking on the street and you see somebody that has like something quite curious, and you look at this person and you're like, wow, what's happening there? That's, to me, like, that's beauty. And I love that. I think we kind of became a cluster of people
Mm-hmm.
towards that fascination, like an organism. And after a while, making collections where it is really about each one informing each other's work. And all these people have been in the studio so much time with me. I have been in their studios so much time. Like Dev Hines has been like almost my sort of like cello angel, because I play cello. He's almost like my godfather of cello. And so this exchange at a certain point, kind of naturally, we transformed it into, oh, you know what? Let's not just like make this for the shows, but let's bring this energy also to the collections that we make for our clients, that we make for our lovers. Let's bring that energy to the stores. Let's bring this energy. Let's try to expand this into the life cycle of Marni. So that's how Marni Jam has born, in a way, with that need. With that need to expand that game, that exchange between each other.
You guys have certainly done an incredible job with it. And we can't
Thank you.
miss the chance to ask Francesco Risso what he thinks is contemporary now.
I have so many controversial, problematic answers. I think food is contemporary now. I love the idea of food being so contemporary now because
you're Italian.
Exactly. And however, I have been refusing my Italianness for such a long time. Then at the end of the day, food puts us together like in such a beautiful way. It feels almost like more contemporary to have like a beautiful dinner all together than just like any other type of exchanges. I love that. Maybe sex also. Actually, I would say sex and food.
I mean, two very universally enjoyed things. And I also think somehow it boils back down to this love that you have for community, which is a beautiful thing and definitely something that's been expressed in the brand.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking the time today, Francesco. It was really lovely to talk to you.
It was really lovely to talk to you too.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of What's Contemporary Now. A special thanks to our show's producer, Cheyenne Asadi, who makes it all possible. Audio post-production by Griffin James, with original theme music by Joseph Top Miller and Chase Coughlin of the Black Soft, and visual design by Aaron Meager and Graham Prentice. Subscribe now to be the first to catch new episodes every week, and if you've enjoyed listening, we'd love to hear from you. Leave us a review and let us know your thoughts. Your feedback helps us improve and reach more listeners like you. Follow us on Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn for additional content, and join the conversation around what is contemporary now.